Hey, welcome to our first video for computer animation modeling for computer animation. Um, this first video, we're going to go over the basics of the interface in Maya. Um, so you kind of can orient yourself a little bit to what we're looking at. Each video, I'm going to try to keep it between 5 and 10 minutes. And then what I would suggest is to open Maya. Hopefully you have it downloaded and you have your 3-button mouse handy. And then kind of just familiarize yourself, play around a little bit, try things out. After each video, I'd kind of recommend doing that. And the way we're going to structure this course and particularly these video tutorials is I'm going to introduce like a certain set of skills within each module, and then at the end of that module there's a project due, and the modules correlate to the weeks of the course. So this first one is just to give us a general overview of modeling in Maya and how to kind of we're going to start at the very basics, and we're going to then export out some rendered images by the end of the week. Okay, so let me start by describing what we're looking at here in the Maya interface. If you go all the way to the top right here, I am working in the Maya Classic workspace. So this is a default layout for the interface. And I can change this with this drop-down menu if I choose. I can go to something like Modeling Standard, which will get rid of the animation timeline below and give me a much larger viewport here. But I think if you're planning to go deeper into Maya and do some animation, that working in a kind of Maya Classic workspace makes some sense, so that you can kind of familiarize yourself with a little bit more of a complex interface, so that you can then be maybe adding some animation skills in the future and can familiarize yourself with something like this at the bottom. The first thing to kind of mention here is what we have at the very top is your toolbar, and there are a lot of kind of standard drop-down menus like File and Edit. We have Create, which allows you to create geometry, lights, cameras. We have a selection drop-down menu here, and then we have some that actually will change based on what menu set we're kind of working in. So right now we're working in the modeling menu set. And Maya is such a large program that it can't fit all of its functions within this one toolbar here. It needs to have multiple toolbars. So you'll see under rigging, we have a different toolbar. Under animation, the toolbar changes again. So we're going to be working in the modeling menu set, and this will give us these different drop-down menus: mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools, etc. that we'll get into a little bit later. Below the main toolbar and to the right of the menu set drop-down menu, we have some icons here. Now, let me just make mention of this. If you hover over anything in Maya, this little help box will pop up, and this can be really helpful, and I might recommend kind of just messing around and kind of hovering over different things in Maya to familiarize yourself with different things, what they will do. Also, at the very bottom of your screen, there's a short helpful tips for this is a display bar for help tips for different tools and selections. So hovering over something will bring, a window will pop up, the help window will pop up telling you what it will do, what that button will do, and then also at the very bottom of your screen you have that kind of help toolbar. So here we have some icons that are a different way of accessing some of the same things that's up in this main toolbar here. So we have kind of create a new scene, save, save, undo, and redo. We have these tabs here will close and open certain sections of this part of the toolbar. Next to some of these, we have And the reason you would want to do this is just to kind of like keep your interface really clean for what you're just going to use. Um, for example, these buttons here, we have, if we're using a 3-button mouse, we might not need to click on those icons. And using what are called the hotkeys, which are different letters on your keyboard or numbers on your keyboard that that access certain tools, and using your 3-button mouse is kind of the quickest way that you can work in Maya. And that's kind of a way that I'd recommend. But there's always some kind of button you can press that will do the same thing. It just takes fractions of a second longer, but those fractions of seconds kind of add up. Okay, next to that, I have a number of kind of snapping options. Which I can get into a little bit later, but this is like a snap to grid, snap to curve. So this is how you can kind of precisely move geometry in your scene. And then all the way at the very right here, I have my render kind of options. I have my render settings, my render view, the hypershade, which is a window that houses all kind of your material information and so on. To the very right of that, I have a number of different windows that are associated with these icons that will change kind of the windows that you see here. They are related to some of these tabs on the side of this panel. And so I have here a modeling toolkit, and we'll be using this quite a lot. This is some kind of shortcut buttons to do some very standard kind of procedures for modeling. Next to that, I have a character controller, which we're not going to get into. Next to that, I have the attribute editor. We'll get into that a little bit later. The next button this floating window pops up for tool settings. And these tool settings correlate to the different tools on this sidebar, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. Something else to kind of mention now is that this floating window, as you can see, when I hover over different parts of the interface, I'm able to kind of customize the way that my interface is displayed. So I can, for example, maybe like embed my tool settings window right here next to this outliner window. Okay, and I might want to do that in order, in order to like have, and then I can double click on them. I might want to do that in order to, have these kind of accessible here. So there's ways that you can kind of customize the interface by doing something, by like being able to kind of embed different floating windows, or I can pull out different windows also. So I can kind of adjust the interface as I see fit. Right, and then this final icon here is the channel box and layer editor, which we'll get into a little bit later. Okay. Below the toolbars, we have what's called the shelf. And the shelf are a number of icons that will change based on which tab of the shelf we're in. And the shelf is just a way to kind of access different tools in Maya based on type. So we have poly modeling, which is what we'll be doing mostly, and also curves and surfaces. So this will give you different kind of ways to create curves, different ways to create polygon primitive objects. And these primitive objects are a way that you can model in Maya by starting with a kind of basic generic geometry and then building out complexity from there. So for example, I'll click here and I just created a sphere in the middle of my viewport in the middle of my workspace. Okay, so this is the shelf again, and these are the different tabs relating to different types of tools and functions in Maya. So below that, to the very left, I have my toolbar, and I have a select tool. I have a lasso select. I have a paint select, which means I can paint my selection. I have the move tool, the rotate tool, and the scale tool. And if I hover over these, you'll see it'll give you what the hotkey is for these things, because you're going to be using these tools so much in Maya that it makes a lot of sense to be using the hotkeys. So Q for select, W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale. So if you click any of those buttons on your keyboard, it will change the tool that you're using. And these are the translate tools. And this is how you model in Maya, by working with these tools, okay, over here on the side. Below these tools, I have a number of different layouts for my viewport here. And what I have right now selected is the single viewport, but below that I can choose a 4-panel layout. And something to kind of note is that at the bottom of each panel there is a descriptor of which camera we are viewing our scene in. So here in this 4-panel layout, I have a top view, a front view, a side view, and a perspective view. I can just have two, the front and the perspective, two panels, two viewport panels, and then at the very bottom here, this will toggle on and off my outliner. And I did embed this tool settings in here, which is something I can get rid of, so I can toggle on and off the outliner. So maybe when you've opened Maya, it looks something like this, and you want to see the outliner, this button will let you do it here. Okay, the outliner is a exhaustive list of everything that you have in your scene. And this is kind of where you can organize what's in your scene, and you can select different objects in your scene. So like if I select these different cameras, they're grayed out, so you can't manipulate them, but I can select my sphere here, and now you see that it's selected here in the viewport. Okay, there's some default things that pop up when you start any new scene in Maya, like default lighting set, etc. here. So this is kind of like your list of everything that you have in your scene. It's a way you can keep yourself really organized. Speaking about the viewport here, we have a number of different menus that we can change what we're seeing in the viewport. Under shading, for example, we can be looking at wireframe. And this might be a good time for me to press F on my keyboard, which will frame what I have selected. So I just pressed F to zoom in on the sphere because I have the sphere selected. And so hitting the hotkey F will frame what I have in what I have selected. Will frame it in the viewport. Okay, so I can see under shading mode that I have a wireframe mode, I have a smooth shading mode, I have flat shading, I have let's see, I don't see some of them here, but they correlate to actually numbers on the keyboard. So if I hit 4 on my keyboard, I have and you can see what it says here. When I hit 4, wireframe display is now on. Press 5, the key 5, to display objects in shaded mode. So now I'm in shaded mode. 6 is shaded with textures, and 7 is with the lights on and the default lighting set off. So once you start putting lights in your scene, you can kind of preview what that lighting looks like by pressing this key 7. Okay. So usually you're going to be working in wireframe mode or kind of shaded mode. And again here, like use all lights, button 7, use default lighting is the default, is the standard here. Under show, we're able to kind of see what we're looking at in the viewport. For example, if I want to, for some reason, turn on or off my polygons, if I unclick polygons, I still have my sphere. It's still in the scene. I'm just not able to see it in my viewport. So this is a way that you can hide or show. The default is to show everything, but you can hide or show all sorts of different objects that are in your scene by type if you need to. Then we have the renderer tab, which just is what renderer is rendering our viewport at the time. And then our panels. So some of these we've gone over here. Are we looking through a perspective view? Or are we looking through any of the orthographic views here? Or do we have a camera that we just put in the scene that we want to look through? You can just go look through selected here. Let's see, and at the very bottom we have our time slider, and this is for animation, which we don't have to get into because we're not going to be animating anything in this course, but just so you're kind of aware of what this is down here, this is the timeline in which you would be accessing in order to create animations in Maya. Okay. So I guess the only thing to really mention about this is that this is kind of a shortcut to getting to the settings and preferences in Maya. So if you click here, it'll bring up our preferences menu. You can also access it under Windows, Setting Preferences, Preferences. And you're able to, well, under the Interface tab, you're able to customize what the interface looks like if you would like to. Under the Settings tab here, which is kind of important, just so you're aware, this is where you're able to set what your working units are. So if you're working in centimeters or inches, which is, if you look at the grid here, each one of these boxes is a unit, and what the world space is. So this is kind of important if you are rapid prototyping, that you know what size, what real world size your object is. Okay, so but a standard is to work in centimeters, and then the last thing that's really important is this undo, and just make sure that your undo cue is on and set to infinite. Sometimes it's set to finite as is kind of default, and this means you're only able to undo up to 50 times, which might seem like a lot, but it's not really when you're working in Maya. You might want to go back further than that, so just set it to infinite. And yeah, that's kind of will do it for right now in the preferences. Okay, so maybe we will stop there for now, and when we come back, we will get into the viewport and how to kind of navigate the viewport.